We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 122. I'm your host, Chris Webster, with my co-host, Paul Zimmerman. Today, we talk to Dr. Peter McKeague and the problem of archaeological data storage. Let's get to it. Peter McKeague works with the data management team in the Heritage Directorate of Historical Environmental Scotland. With a background in archaeological field survey, looking for and mapping archaeological sites in upland landscapes of Scotland, he is interested in the documentation of archaeological sites, landscapes, and activities within the national record of the historic environment in Scotland. He has helped develop PastMap, which can be found at pastmap.org.uk, enabling users to browse the archaeology of Scotland via a map browser. He is currently undertaking a project to develop a manifesto for a special data infrastructure for archaeology, funded through the Royal Society of Edinburgh, challenging archaeologists to develop common approaches to how they map the historic environment. All right, welcome back to the Archaeotech Podcast, and I'm your host, Chris Webster, with Paul Zimmerman on for the first time in 2020. How's it going, Paul?
It's been challenging, but I'm okay. How are you doing?
I hear you. Good, Paul. And I'm just trying to keep everything going over here. Got a busy schedule, busy things going on, and but all good things, I think, on this end. So we'll keep that rolling. But as I mentioned in the introduction and the bio, we have a guest today, and our guest is Peter McKeague. How's it going, Peter?
I'm doing well, thank you very much. Over in Scotland, where it's blowing a blizzard outside.
Doing field work in a blizzard in Scotland. That sounds awesome, right?
It's great.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. So why don't you tell us a little about this paper that you wrote? We're going to link to your paper that prompted this interview, actually. Our producer, Jamie, found you. It's called Towards a Spatial Data Infrastructure for Archaeology. We're going to link to that in the show notes. But why don't you just give us the abstract version of that for our listeners so we can set the stage?
So the title is actually the name of a project, which is looking at why we're not making the most out of the digital spatial data that we captured during the course of fieldwork and other research. We're very much focused on the site, descriptive accounts of information. We consign our images, our plans to the printed page, or increasingly a PDF page, where you can't actually take them, interact with them, and combine them with other plans from other projects to build up a digital map of the archaeological landscape for use in GIS and other geospatial technologies. So it's about trying to move from how we've practiced archaeological reporting for decades, centuries, to trying to engage with the modern geospatial world and create geospatial data sets. And that requires a lot of work, a lot of standards, and a step change in how we do things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we deal with a lot of data in archaeology, and I feel like we've been at this crossroads for a long time, but it seems different now with the way people are collecting data, via different tablet-based apps and smartphone-based apps and stuff like that. And just, really kind of concerned with, okay, how are we collecting all this data, but not concerned with what we're doing with the data, how we're managing it in ways that other people can access it and making it, not proprietary. Paul and I have talked about that a lot, about different file formats and things like that. Man, it's a huge problem. Yeah,
that you've just touched on several threads and strands of information in that conversation, that statement. So we're collecting lots of data in different ways. We've got a lot of digital technology, from high-tech digital GPS equipment, mapping things digitally. Data's gathered digitally. It's prepared into reports and illustrations. It's worked up as digital files, and then all you get at the end, if you're lucky, is the project report with the PDF, the image of the data. You don't actually have the data that underlies the report. So there's that. So the project I'm participating in this week, we're field checking observations from LiDAR aerial survey where my colleagues have identified potential archaeological sites, and we're going out and checking that data digitally. So the data has been gathered digitally and will be held and shared digitally. The other key thing I think you talked about there was the access, formats and licensing. So there's licensing issues. What are the terms of reuse? Can you actually find the data?
Right.
And that's not just about spatial data. That's about any data from a project. Where does that go? Where's the archive for that? What are the terms of reuse of that data? Is the format the right format? So there's a whole range of questions there that are sort of part of the project, or my paper is looking at how those questions apply to the spatial information, the mapped information.
Yeah, I had a question about that. I definitely enjoyed the paper, but I was wondering, you're making a big distinction between spatial data and other kinds of archaeological data. I mean, they all, especially amongst digital data, they all have a similar set of problems, but spatial data seems to be the one that you're especially concerned with. I mean, it's right there in the title, so that's kind of obvious. But could you explain for our listeners a little bit what makes spatial data fundamentally different?
Okay, so my background is I've spent the last 25 years working in what was formerly the Royal Commission of Historical Monuments of Scotland, or the Royal Commission for short, and latterly as part of the Historic Environment Scotland. The part of the office I work in is very much the survey and recording team. We're about mapping recording the archaeology. Back in the 100 years ago, when we first started, it was one person going around creating a list of sites and publishing those as an inventory. So this is the standard. I'm writing a description, you might get a site survey, and that was the technology of the times. The Ordnance Survey, who were Britain's national mapping agency, they're responsible for mapping the topography of the country. They recorded archaeological remains, or antiquities as they call them, as both topographic features, and also they were interested in the sort of military significance of forts and things. They had a record system. We had an inventory system. In the 1980s, they combined to form the National Monuments Record of Scotland, which is now the National Record of the Historic Environment. And that used databases. When databases were being developed in the 1980s, my predecessors used the database to organize, transferred the card index to the digital format. And then in the 1990s, we started experimenting with geographic information systems and landscape style surveys. So electronic distance measurement equipment allowed us to map landscapes, whereas previous survey techniques, plain table surveys, you really could only focus at the site scale. So we moved from a site perspective to a landscape perspective. And the GIS gives you the opportunity to view that information, but to be able to use that information effectively in a geographic information system requires standards. So you have to have consistent ways of documenting the information you're capturing. So that's why I'm interested in the spatial side. The inventory side, there's a lot of challenges with digital archives, digital data in general. In the United Kingdom, we have a digital archive within Historic Environment Scotland, but there's also the Archaeology Data Service at the University of York, who are leading on a lot of digital archiving techniques, and they're partnered with TDAR in America, who also are looking at digital archiving issues. So there's a lot of work going on recognizing the need and the value of digital archives and the need to preserve those. My interest, as I say, is the spatial element. It's about taking information from different projects and stitching it together to create a landscape. That requires a sort of different mentality from we've put our project report in the archive. It's about making sure that the data you put in the archive is easily combined with another project's data, so that you can build up a more of a landscape picture of what's been going on. So if you've got like an urban excavation in a historic town in Britain, you get the opportunity to excavate a plot of land as a building site comes available, and then 5 years later you might get another chance to visit to excavate another plot of land. So it's about making sure that you can get those pieces of information and stitch them together. It's building up the evidence. So it's a sort of a jigsaw puzzle without all the pieces.
I got a question concerning the actual recording of archaeological information, like the narrative and photographic data, stuff like that. Everything but the spatial data. I'm wondering. We've talked to other people that work over in the UK. I'm a CRM archaeologist here in the United States. So looking at that, from what I've heard, there are very few standards, I guess is the way to put it, as far as how to collect the archaeological data. Like there are some outfits, they use some forms that they use to actually record sites on. Like I work in Nevada, there's a very specific set of forms from the Bureau of Land Management that we have to use to collect archaeological data. Even when we write reports for the BLM, they give you the chapter headings and they say, here's what your report's going to look like, and turn it in and make it look like this. But correct me if I'm wrong, but are there the same standards, let's just say in Scotland, let's not even look at the whole UK, since Scotland is going to not be part of the UK maybe in the future here. Anyway, that's another conversation. But
that's another topic.
But are there any standards that you're working with? And furthermore, when you're working on this project here, are you working on an academic university-based project, or is this some sort of contract or a CRM archaeology project? I'm not really sure what you call it over there.
The project is a 1 year funded research project through the Royal Society of Edinburgh. So it's a project that anyone who's we're not part of a university, but we're related to a university. So we've got analog status to a university. So it's been undertaken under that auspices. And it's working with international partners. So I've been consulting colleagues in Ireland, France, Belgium, Sweden and Germany, as well as colleagues in Britain to see what the archaeological practices are going on. So in terms of standards, we use a form called OASIS, which is an online form that allows people undertaking field work to report their information to the relevant local authority historic environment record and to the national organisation. And the project reports can be accessed from either of those organisations or through the Archaeology Data Service library. That form captures key information in a structured way, so it captures who did what, where and when, and allows the field worker to upload a project file. The project report is a PDF, and we also encourage, but it's not mandatory, that they upload a boundary file. So that's information that documents the project. Then if you look at excavations, I don't know the answer, but I know that a lot of units have their own methods, own recording forms to capture information and document the details of excavations. In some countries, there are commercially available software. I'm allowed to mention names.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so Scandinavia, Sweden has Intrasis, which is a very sophisticated GIS software package. In Britain, there's LP Archaeology, have the ARC recording package, and these packages are available. So there's an opportunity, but there's no requirement that you must use a specific piece of software and have these fields at that level. I think from the curatorial point of view, we're more interested in having the report, the deliverable, rather than the interoperability within excavation archives. Looking at field survey, we have our own survey methodology. We map things in a certain way. We have our own internal standards, but the commercial companies undertaking field work under a development process, they will have their own systems. So it's just trying to say, well, we actually should be thinking about trying to develop the same software. Then looking at geophysical software, geophysical processes, they will have specific metadata they're required to fill in, that best practice requires them to say what equipment was used, what was the resolution, the settings of the instrumentation, so that you can assess whether the data is fit for purpose.
Okay.
But whether or not they all document the processes that they then applied to filter the raw data to produce the grayscale plots and the interpretation is another matter. And again, as I say, I'm working a survey project, so we're going out and mapping archaeology, in this case from LiDAR interpretations. In the past, we've gone out and we've surveyed it with GPS and mapped the archaeological landscape. That's one way of interpreting the information. Geophysical survey, again, they'll produce an interpretation drawing, which will describe the archaeology they've interpreted from their surveys, but we don't have a consistent standard saying we can't produce a consistent map of what the archaeology looks like.
Yeah.
So there's no consistent terminology. In terms of databases and things, we're very good. We've got a controlled list, the SORI, that will give you a list of terms that are in our preferred usage, but we don't have the same level of detail and structure for spatial information.
Okay. Yeah, something you said there that was interesting to me about like excavation. Like, there's no real standard between the archaeological units or companies, as we would call them here, regarding the actual collection data, and they're more concerned with the reports and producing the data, which is a very interesting concept to me, because sorry, I can I correct you. I think that they will undertake the documentation, but what we see as curatorial officers is the report. I see. So you don't get to see like the raw data that produced the report. You just see the report.
The data might end up in an archive at some point in time.
And that still goes.
But
that still goes along with what I was saying. I wasn't mentioning that they were like, I wasn't trying to say that they were like not doing a good job in collecting the data, just that it's not the focus of the presentation. And I understand that. I mean, we always focus on the results, but then having the ability to go back and research a data set and maybe do a different analysis on it or something like that is really difficult to do if the data is buried in somebody's database somewhere and not easily accessible, or in a format that might be easily accessible. So we experience that all the time over here in the States as well. We often only get our hands on the report, and the person who wrote the report with the other data, with the data that they collected, I mean, who knows? Maybe they died 10 years ago and we don't even have access to it because their company dissolved and all their stuff was handed off to somebody else, and who knows? So, yeah.
I think that's a big risk to data. We don't have an audit trail from who's completed an excavation to has that excavation been deposited in the archive. We don't measure that flow line. The online form Oasis is a start. It at least gives us an idea. Right. That we know what was being reported. I should add that Oasis, we work with Archaeology Scotland, who also publish an annual yearbook, Discovering Excavation in Scotland. So we're actually very good at knowing what fieldwork has gone on in Scotland. I'd say we're probably getting 90% of it through those two processes, but we don't know. We don't record how many of those projects have then ended up being deposited with us. And in some cases, the entry in Discovering Excavation Scotland might be all we ever hear about that. Somebody's gone out and found an interesting site and they just submitted a note. That might be all we ever get. But we don't have an audit trail. I should say I work in an organization. I'm fortunate to work in an organization where we have both the record system, the inventory side of information, and the archive. But we've never actually sat down and gone, there's been 20 excavations in that season, but we've only got 3 of them, where are the other 17?
Sure.
So it's an interesting question. I think it's something that we ought to be a bit more intelligent about, get a bit more information about, how much are we actually losing through just the seepage on time.
Okay. All right. Well, I think on that note, we are going to take our first break, and then we'll come back and keep talking to Peter McKeague right after this. Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code Archaeotech. That's ARCHAEOTECH. Looking to expand your knowledge of X-rays and imaging in the archaeology field? Then check out An Introduction to Paleoradiography, a short online course offering professional training for archaeologists and affiliated disciplines. Created by archaeologist, radiographer, and lecturer James Elliott, the content of this course is based upon his research and teaching experience in higher education. It is approved by the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists as 4 hours of training. That's in the UK, for those of you that don't know. So don't miss out on this exciting opportunity for professional and personal development. For more information on pricing and course structure, visit paleoimaging.com. That's PALEO imaging.com. And look for the link in the show notes to this episode. All right, welcome back to episode 122 of the Archaeotech podcast. And Paul and I are talking to Peter McKeague, and we're going to keep talking about data. So, Peter, you mentioned, well, you didn't mention this, but your paper did. One of the big takeaways from your paper was a note that we wrote down here to mention for you is a call for greater use of linked data and machine learning. And you kind of alluded to linked data without saying the words linked data when you talked about TDAR and some of the other repositories where the Archaeological Data Service, where they're kind of hot on that. And I know linked data is a big thing for DINA, the Digital Index in North American Archaeology. They're huge on linked data with making sure all that works. But could you explain for our listeners just first what you mean by linked data and machine learning, and then we'll expand on that. Okay,
so linked data is a way of structuring data so that it can link with other data. So it becomes more useful through semantic browsing, semantic searches. So the big linked data concept in archaeology is CDOC CRM, and it's got various extensions. It defines precisely how things relate to each other and uses graphical databases to join things together. So we're talking earlier about lots of people producing lots of excavation databases, and these could all be in slightly different formats. They may have different ways of calling a field. Somebody might say it's a monument type, or it's a monument class, or a feature type, feature class. The linked data just gives you a way of linking these things together. So it's basically about trying to join databases together so you can create and generate much more powerful searches.
So does that work in effect like a translation table between database A and database B?
I suppose it could be described as that. I think it's a bit more powerful than that, though. It can grow organically. It can manage multiple different data sets, and it documents the relationships. So object, predicate, subject, predicate, object. So it works in triples and things. So you can create lots of very powerful queries across that side of things. I think it's quite a high step in. So most people who work in archaeological fieldwork and recording wouldn't be using it, but a lot of people use it to as a research tool. It's a very powerful research tool.
Would this be a tool set then that a researcher is using? Is it something that would be produced by the repository holders, maintainers, or is it something that, I guess you just ruled out that it would be something that the field researchers would be populating a whole lot? At what level does this work its way into the system?
I think most people anyone who's working on commercial projects, they're basically going to be using commercial software packages. You will get the outputs in proprietary software formats. We would preserve them in non-proprietary CSV type formats for text files, spreadsheets, that kind of thing. And then other people, if you're doing a specific project, you're looking at the relationships between different data sets, you would do that as a research project. So it's quite a high threshold for usage. So you'd be doing that probably in a postgraduate environment.
Yeah, we just interviewed a gentleman over in Spain who actually, his research facility is actually over in the UK as well, moving it over to Spain. And he talked about machine learning, specifically as it applies to basically photogrammetric maps made from drone imagery, and then using machine learning to find things like pottery and other things. And what are your thoughts on, I guess, machine learning from a data standardization standpoint? Do you think we can develop some machine learning algorithms, I guess, that will work on other people's data sets, where you can just be like, hey, I've got all these data. Where's my list of algorithms I can pull down, and then add to the learning element of that, and then, maybe improve on it. That would be a nice standard to get to, but I don't think we quite have that yet.
Oh, absolutely. And as I say, the project I'm working on at the moment, my colleagues are working on, it's the RAMP project, the Rapid Archaeological Mapping Project.
Mm-hmm.
We're using openly available, openly reusable LiDAR data that the Scottish Government acquired. And at the moment, my colleagues are visualizing the data, and we're still going through the process of recognizing, looking at the data, identifying anomalies, and then going to field checking them. But my colleagues are also working with Norwegian Computing Centre, and I know of other initiatives that are doing similar things where they're developing machine learning to be able to recognize the targets, if you like, or the potential sites, and you can then apply a level of certainty to these things. So yeah, you can assess a lot of data very, very quickly just by different signatures coming back from the data sets. Yes, I think it's definitely the future. It allows us to cover a lot larger area. Scotland's a very large and hilly country.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of time to survey. We were never going to survey it all in one go, but it does give us the opportunity to assess what the potential archaeology is in a lot of areas very, very quickly. So yeah,
okay.
It's definitely the future.
One thing I want to bring up, I think this is a good point to do it, because I want to have time to talk about this, is we have a lot of questions on here that are about data and reusing data and all kinds of different things. What happens to data? We've talked about collecting data, but let's talk about archaeologists, because I got to be honest, archaeologists aren't known to be the most tech savvy people on the planet. So if we're talking about data standards and having all these technologies and applications and things available to us as not only a starting point, but something to build on that other people have collected, what do we need to be teaching archaeologists in school? Should it be required, do you think, to add these to anthropology or archaeology curriculums, or should they be required to go get a minor in computer science or something like that to be able to understand all this stuff? Or do you think we can get to a point where anyone can understand this and it just becomes the norm?
I think you want to push the standards out from the people who are curating and managing data to the people who are creating that data, so that you demonstrate, well, wouldn't it be good if we all did this in the same, we all used the same way to describe things? Right. And it's just about, we have a lot of standards. We sit there and go, what do they mean by this? And we then try and reclassify something. The people on the ground are the people who've seen this thing, so they should be able to apply the terms that we want to use. So I think it's about pushing standards and processes out to the people who are actually creating information, because actually they're the ones who know about the information. So it's part of the general process, just improving how we undertake our work. So yeah, it should be a much more commonly recognized statement there.
Okay.
I don't disagree. I've got a serious question. Maybe this is a little afield from managing the data, but in the collecting of data, terminology is always a really big issue, especially if we're trying to compare cross-culturally, cross-regionally. My big part of my dissertation was coming up with a pottery typology. So there was no terminology that I could use other than some very basic descriptions of forms and pastes and the like. Can that sort of a basis of common framework amongst archaeologists, can that be done ground up, or does that have to be enforced top down? And if it's top down, who's the top that gets to decide?
I think it's a combination of both. I think my main concern about terminology is sort of saying these are what you must do. You don't want to stifle innovation and research by saying you must record in a certain way, but you need to allow that flexibility. So it's a sort of, I think domain specialists need to define what is relevant for their study area. So if you're interested in pottery, these are the aspects of that pottery, and there should be, an agreement as to what's significant to what's important to measure.
All right. Well, what are your What are your ideal standards, Peter? What are you hoping to achieve by not only the research you guys are doing now, but you wrote this paper to, bring awareness to this and talk about it. But what's your goals with all this?
So my ultimate aim is, I suppose, the simplest goal would be just to move away from illustrations and PDFs that are basically raster images that are dumb to a format that actually I can reuse. So I can drop that in. It would be good if we could all try and use the same ways of describing features, but an excavation, people will describe everything at a context level, so every individual postal, but then you might get a report that just says, well, we found a hut defined by a series of posts. It's sort of the levels of granularity you're working with. But I think if we can try and work towards defining basic minimum standards that allow us to take a shape, combine it with other shapes, and share common attribution, that would be a great start. And then the flip side of that is the rights to reuse other people's data. So we need to move more towards. We're moving very close to open access publications. A lot of the projects we see reports come out in open access publications. A lot of the university funding streams require that now, but we ought to be thinking about that in terms of the open data, the data that people create, so that it's actually accessible, it's downloadable, and it's reusable. It's not a big ask. So I think, have you heard of the FAIR data principles?
No, I don't think so.
Only through the article. I don't know what they are.
Right. So the FAIR data principles are that data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So these are very, very laudable standards. So if I'm interested in data, I want to know how I can find it. So that'll be an archive catalog. So the spatial data infrastructure world, the kind of management of mapping data, if you like, I want to be able to go to a map and see where have all the excavations been, where have all the archaeological surveys been in a certain area. So that's finding the data. I want to make sure it's accessible. That means it's got an identifier that you can go back to and find it again and again. Interoperable standards. So controlled lists, that kind of thing. So interoperable, should have formal, accessible, shared, and broadly applicable language for knowledge representation. So you know what people are describing, so you can understand how they mean it.
Right.
And reusable is obviously it should be described with accurate and relevant attributes. So I was talking about geophysical survey data earlier. What type of survey was undertaken? What was the machinery? What was the resolution it was captured at? What was the spacing of the sensors, etc. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we need a clear and accessible data usage license, one that's not restrictive of practice. So these are all very laudable principles. They're not designed for archaeology, but they apply to archaeology.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've noticed, going back to education just a little bit, because everything you mentioned was, it would be amazing to live in a world like that, where that was the standard, right? And I think one of the problems I've noticed, just as a CRM archaeologist working with people who are, fresh out of their undergrad and off onto a project a lot, they're not. You learn a lot of theory. You learn a lot about archaeology. You learn a lot about, culture and things like that. But you don't, even if you take a lab class, you might learn certain lab methods and how to, write down in a lab form and do these things. But it's almost like extra. You know what I mean? It's not the focus from day one, which is collecting solid, usable data that makes sense. And thinking about, listen, I'm not even going to put my shovel or my trowel in the ground unless I have a way to record this. And then teaching people to manage their excitement a little bit when they find something and say, I don't want to I've seen people that are experienced archaeologists just pull stuff out of the ground, like a pot or something like that over on the East Coast, when they're like, because we haven't seen anything in days, and they're like, oh my God. And they're like, all of a sudden it's bam, out of context and we can't do anything with it now. And it's like, we just need to make that the focus from the get-go and highlight it.
So I think you highlight a very good point that a university degree course, an academic course, is very much focused on the theory and the interpretation and that side of things. And I'm not sure how much the practical comes in until maybe you have to deal with a data set or you're out on a field project. I know that when I was a student, we had, I think it was 6 weeks field work a year we had to do. Now it's probably 6 weeks over the course of the degree. So there's a lot less going on. But yeah, the most jobs when you leave university are probably excavation jobs or working for a commercial unit.
Yeah, I got my undergrad in anthropology, and the archaeological lab methods class was optional, and I didn't take it. Like, I was doing other stuff, and I didn't even take the lab methods class. So I left a 4-year degree program without ever having taken a lab methods class. And my field school was at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where we did very little, like the people that were out there doing the work were us and I hate to say it, but locals that they had hired to do stuff. And they come out year after year. They were collecting a lot of the data and writing things down, and we were just doing the fun stuff. And so I went into my first professional CRM archaeology project without really knowing how to collect archaeological data and had to learn on the job. and that's typical, you know?
Yeah, that's not unusual.
And I think, I was describing about lots of archaeological companies go out and undertake field work for a range of reasons, commercial, community engagement, research. And it's very much project focused rather than saying, well, these projects feed into a greater picture. So yeah, there's no appreciation that all the sum of the parts is something other than the parts. You're getting a bigger picture by being able to combine data, but you're just on a project. You don't really see why you're collecting data against for part of a wider research agenda.
Well, I have just one quick final wrap up. I liked your description of FAIR, and actually, I do think it came up in a previous podcast episode. I'll have to go back through the archives to see it, but obviously, you can't attack every aspect of that all at once. So, is there, in your estimation, one particular way that you could take a dent out of FA, I, or R?
I wouldn't be trying to tackle the FAIR within in my office or other people who, that's part of a much wider issue about how we serve our public, our audience online in the future, and where we're developing a project with the Heritage Hub to make more of our data accessible and joined up. But I'm primarily interested in the mapping data, so I want to be able to sort of manage information. It's just working with the archaeologists who create the information to try and bring it together on test projects. So as opening up that conversation with the people who are creating the data. And I think there's a willingness there. You say, well, actually, we can do this. We can collate this data. So we haven't really touched on the spatial data infrastructures. Mm-hmm. So this is a way of delivering more efficient data management to unlock the economic value through saving time and money for the people who are creating and using that data. In Europe, 2007, there's the INSPIRE directive, which is all about addressing, systemic environmental issues like transnational flooding on the major waterways of Europe. The Rhine, the Danube flow through many different countries. They flood. There was, at the time, it was acid rain, and pollution was a serious issue. Now it's climate change. People need to access this data time and time again so that they can make their decisions better. This is 2007, 2009. It was transposed into national legislation in the European Union countries, and the idea is that this is going to be delivered by 2021. Cultural heritage archaeology has features a very, very small part in that conversation. It's part of the protected sites theme of INSPIRE. But what it does say is you must then share all your spatial information about protected sites as web map services, view services that you can use directly in your GIS, or download services, which again you can take and use in your GIS against your own data and perform analysis on your machine using our data. Inspire is great. It's only addresses public sector information. It doesn't address the wealth of the data that's created through private companies that are undertaking archaeological fieldwork, and indeed some of the academic people don't engage with that. So I think that's the model. So we know how to serve up a shapefile online. We know, as a web map service said, this is the protected area, designated area. We can do the same for these are where the excavations have been, and this is where we've undertaken our field survey. So it's not hard. We just need to build the examples.
Okay.
But it's not, without legislation, it's slightly harder. It's best practice. It's promoting that for the future. And we're moving into a world of automated vehicles, Internet of Things. The whole world is geospatial, and we're lagging way behind. So that's where I want to get to, is to sort of say, you undertake a piece of archaeological fieldwork. It should combine with other pieces of archaeological fieldwork to build up a map of our knowledge of where we've undertaken fieldwork.
Yeah, if we think of the archaeological record more of like a puzzle rather than these little fiefdoms that we used to do our dissertations and thesis work in, then we'd be more concerned with fitting in with the rest of the puzzle, making sure we have the right shape to our data that fits right in the system. You
find another piece of the jigsaw.
That's right.
So at the moment, as I say, at the moment we used to publish reports in journals. You had an article in the journal that summed up your results. If it was a significant excavation, it'd be its own monograph. All that sort of 20th century, 19th century, 20th century way of reporting. We're continuing that in a digital form. It's just a digital skeuomorph of the PDF. Is just a digital skeuomorph of the paper, the printed report. We're not actually getting the value out of the data. So we need to make that step change and say digital data is important. Let's have it in the format, and let's have it in the format with a license that allows us to reuse it.
All right.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I prefer to release my data in the form of a podcast. So thanks for helping out with that, Peter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been fun.
All right. Well, again, thanks a lot. And I'd love to have you on again sometime to talk about these topics, especially if you guys release something new or come up with some answers, and we can bring these on and talk about them and help promote them to other people who are collecting data, which is everyone doing archaeology. So
I can draw your attention to a big European project the University of York are leading, Archaeology Data Service, University of York are coordinating, which is Saving European Archaeology from the Digital Dark Ages, which is a 4-year project looking exactly at the issue of what's happening to digital data, how are countries set up to handle this. So that's definitely something you should a topic for a future podcast.
Yeah, we'll have to dig into that. No pun intended.
I can send you
the links. Please do.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Peter. We're going to end this segment right now, and Paul and I will be back in a second for the App of the Day segment. Back in a minute. You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to arcpodnet.com/shop for a link. That's arcpodnet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show. Welcome back to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 122, and this is our App of the Day segment. And I may as well just kick it off since I'm the one talking right now. Paul, I don't know about you, but I have been planning for a long time now, and we've talked about the fact that I bought a boat back in the summertime, probably more times than I probably should have, and on an archaeology podcast. However, that boat is coming in handy, and I want to mention a project really fast that you can find them on Instagram. I'll try to link to it if I remember, because I'm not sure if they've got a website all set up yet, but it's called Clean Up the Lake. And they're basically doing the lake edge at Lake Tahoe here just outside of Reno, which is shared by Nevada and California. The border goes right down. Actually, kind of 2/3 of it is California and 1/3 of it is Nevada. I think that's how it shakes out. But they're doing an underwater diving cleanup of Lake Tahoe, and they are basically I guess going out from about 6 feet out, 6 feet in depth, I should say, from the edge, because what I didn't know is property lines typically extend out to 6 feet down from a house that has waterfront property. And then they're going out to 30 feet in depth. And in some parts of the lake, that could be a mile from the shore. And in other parts of the lake, that could be 2 feet. So, yeah, it's really variable. And their plan is to break this up into segments. They've got 8 master divers they'll have out there and other volunteer divers, and then people in boats on the top, not only supporting the divers, but also picking up taking the trash bags that they're taking one GPS point on these bags that they're collecting stuff from, one GPS point for a segment, basically. And the segments are, I think there's 3 per mile, or maybe it's a little tighter than that. So they're kind of big areas, but there's not a whole lot you can do because the GPS doesn't really work underwater. And, as far as picking up every single piece of trash and GPSing it. So they're taking it by sections, and then that stuff is going to be analyzed to see what it tells us about the history of that segment of the lake. A lot of it's going to be probably modern trash, but Lake Tahoe has been in use by everybody. European descendants, for the last 150 years, and Native Americans for the last 10,000 years. So there could be a lot of stuff down there. And not only that, but they're also going to have jet ski support, where they'll have radio control back to the jet ski and radio communication back to the jet ski, where they'll be able to, if there's something down under the water that they can't pick up, maybe it's too big, because there are shipwrecks in Lake Tahoe and other things. So if there's something they can't pick up, or there's something that just seems like it's too fragile or rare or something like that, or you're historically significant, they're going to leave it where it is, and then they'll take photos in place, take some notes about it under the water, and then basically radio up to the jet ski that says, hey, come over the bubbles from the scuba tanks and take a point right there. And then they'll give them the photo numbers and stuff like that. They're actually, the way I got hooked up with all this is they're using WildNote to collect all their data. So a person that I don't work with her, but she has an office here at the Reno Collective, where I have a co-working facility. She works for an organization that is helping them do the data collection, and she's helping them write all their grants and stuff. So she's heard me talk about WildNote before at other people, and she hooked me up with this guy that's running the project, and now I'm building all the forms for him. Well, it comes back to the boat, and I might be using my boat as well for 2 days a week over the summer. And kind of what's in it for me is I looked into putting my boat in Lake Tahoe, and a slip for June 1st to September 30th is $4,000. Not only that, but my boat holds 70 gallons worth of gas, and I'll burn that in a weekend. And gas on Lake Tahoe is from $5 to $7 a gallon. So you factor all that in, it starts to get expensive. And when somebody said to me, we'll pay for it, I was like, wow, I'll do this without pay. Like, just let me sit up there on my boat. I can get some work done, because while they're underwater for an hour at a time. I mean, there's literally nothing to do. So I can sit there and, do some work, get some stuff done, edit some podcasts, whatever. And then, for the rest of the week, just have a full tank of gas to play with. So, and a place to park the boat, which would be great. But the reason I'm saying all this is not only to highlight that cool project. And again, I'll try to link to that in the show notes. But I've been looking, that boat was a catalyst, man. And I've been looking at other big boats. My wife and I have a desire, probably within the next 2 years, to either rent out or continue or sell our house entirely and move on to a boat, move on to something big that's livable, and then just use that to travel around and create history podcasts and interview people and just live on it and do different things. But one of the way that we might have a gateway to that, because to be honest, I'm ready to go tomorrow, but my wife is maybe not so much. And she wants a little baby step, and a baby step might be an RV. And I'm not too keen on the RV idea, just because, I don't know, RVs are cool and all, and there's a lot of stuff to see in this country, but man, I just like the thought of anchoring out somewhere and just being so totally self-sufficient. And you could do that with an RV, but typically the places where you can park an RV or a trailer and not have to worry about overnight costs and all that stuff, they're typically so remote that you also don't have cell service, and I can't do any work. And if we're going to live on this thing, we need to be able to also do work at the same time. And that's why I think a boat is just more accessible for that. That being said, I downloaded the RV Trader app. I think there might also be a Boat Trader app, but I haven't downloaded that yet. But the RV Trader app is actually really good. And I didn't think I'd be talking about it on this show, but a lot of archaeologists, in fact, I just won a project that I'm going to have to go down to Southern California for. And it's a place that was hit by an earthquake last year. And a lot of the infrastructure has been seriously damaged. And there's a lack of hotel rooms. And it's actually a combination of things. One, the military there is a big part of the town, and they are helping to rebuild the town. But in order to do that, they have to bring in a ton of people, and those people are going to have nowhere to stay. Like, they have to rebuild the town and yet bring in a bunch of people and they have nowhere to stay. So they're talking about building man camps and stuff like that. So I downloaded this because I was like, well, I'm bringing my truck anyway, and my wife is probably going to come with me on this project. She's an archaeologist and she just quit her job. And so she's going to have time available. In fact, as you're listening to this, her last day is tomorrow. And so she's probably going to come with me on this project, but I was thinking maybe we can just get a little tow behind trailer and I can see what's on RV Trader here. And I got to say, this thing is really cool. So you can sort by the different RVs at the top, and everything from a toy hauler camper trailer to a camper shell. And you just click on the icon and then it automatically sorts everything down below. And it shows you, it knows where you're at. So it shows you the stuff that's nearest to you first, but it also shows you stuff just all over the country. And it's just really smooth, really slick. And you can favorite things that you want to look at later. And if you want to email or call the dealer or person, the phone number and email is right there. And it's just, I got to say, it's really well done. I mean, a lot of times these apps are just garbage. Like, their websites too are often just garbage. Like, Boat Trader's website is ridiculous. It was built in like 1995 and never updated. And the only thing they do is, have a good search engine on there. And that's pretty much it. But I really like the presentation of this RV Trader app. And I know a lot of archaeologists are always looking to be self-sufficient. And I've known archaeologists that lived and traveled around in RVs. And I know several of them that have camper shells on top of their trucks. And I thought this might be a good way to find something new. So, yeah, I don't know. Didn't think I'd be talking about this on the Archaeotech podcast, but it's related to archaeology somehow. And I want mine to be high tech anyway. So there you go.
Have you run into many archaeologists that use RVs in the field, dig bombs, whatever?
Yeah. So there's only one that that comes to mind. And I know there's been others. I've heard of them, but I had some good friends of ours. They bought an RV and they actually lived in that for, I want to say, a year, 2 years. And I think it was over the field season, over the winter. They stored it actually here in Nevada at a storage facility. And then, I don't know, went about their separate ways, did something else, but they were a couple. But over the summer during the field season, they certainly had their RV. And I actually interviewed them. I interviewed the guy for my book. And I had a whole section in there on living on the road in my book. And he's got a little feature in about living in an RV. And some of the concerns he brought up are very valid. And that's why I like some of the detail on this RV app, because he said the biggest concerns are really maintenance. And, they are shovel bumps. So they didn't buy like a brand new, Fleetwood. I mean, they bought a Class C, which is a little bit smaller, and it's the one between a van and like a full size RV. And so they bought a Class C, and it was a little bit older, a little bit less space in there that you would want, and some things were falling apart because these things are riddled with wires and plumbing and, just the normal stuff a vehicle has, like brakes and and an engine, steering linkage and all that stuff. And then they've got battery systems. You can get solar for them. Some of them have water makers on board to purify water and just all kinds of stuff. And all that can break. And, it's like taking your house on a gravel road, stuff's going to shake around and do different things, and it's all going to break. And that's the biggest thing he said. Ideal. No, that's the biggest thing he said was an issue, was just staying up on the maintenance. So typically you're probably going to buy something a little older just because of cost, and you got to be willing to either be handy or, have a little extra money in the vehicle fund. But, in the end, you could save a ton of money too. If you're saving a couple $1,000 a month on hotel lodging costs because you're staying in your RV out in the parking lot, maybe you can afford to keep it going. And that's what your jam is. So I don't know. Hard to say. But I have known plenty of people that had like camper shells, way more. They had a big truck and they had a camper shell on top of it. And they went around with that. That's a little more sustainable because there's fewer moving parts, but then you get your vehicle to worry about too. So, anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah. So check it out. Paul, what do you got?
I'm not going to mention exactly why. If you're curious, you can go back to my my Twitter feed to like the second week in January and find out. But I've had a need for for a white noise generator to help me relax and to help me sleep sometimes. And so it turns out I had one on my phone that I've used in the past and never deleted because it's very good. And because I've been using this one with some frequency lately, I figured I'd share. It's called Binaural. It's for iOS and Mac. It's free, but you can pay for additional features, $2.99. And what it is it's a kind of a white noise generator. It generates binaural beats. And what those are is if you have a sine wave of one frequency in one ear and a sine wave of slightly different frequency in another ear, your brain will get a third rhythm that's keyed to the difference in the frequencies of those two. Of those two primary, what you're actually hearing, your brain will kind of almost hear a third rhythm between them.
Wow.
And it's a very strange sensation. When you hear it, it feels kind of like ASMR stuff. It's more of a feeling than an actual sound. So that much is true enough. That's how binaural beats work. This particular app, it's a very beautifully designed app, very simple. All it does is it gives you a binaural beat. You can change the frequencies and you can change the volume. You can overlay rain sounds. And then if you unlock the extra features, you can sync it into your health app where it'll go in as meditation, I think, or mindfulness rather.
Sure.
You can change the colors on it if you pay the extra money, and you can add a timer to it. So basically you launch it and you scroll left or right across just the middle of the screen, and it tells you what the frequency is, but it also tells you, and this is where binaural beats, the science is, let's say, not settled on this, but the rhythm that you hear, that beat in between, the one that your brain makes up, can be mapped to brainwave activity.
Okay.
Right. So you have certain brainwaves, certain frequencies that are related to things like REM sleep or high activity. The implication of this and other binaural apps is that they can replicate those, that they can make you have extra relaxation or whatnot. I don't know if that's BS or not, but I do find that I've been using this particular app quite a bit down in the alpha and theta range, which is like 4 to about 12, 13 hertz, which are theta is meditation and sleep. Alpha is relaxation and dreams. I know that because I'm reading it off of the screen here as I scroll. But I find that if I have a fairly heavy rain generated sound on top, just like any other white noise generator would have, and the binaural beats somewhere in that range with headphones on, I find it is easy for me to not think too heavily, which is what I've been needing to do sometimes when I have to go to sleep. So, whether you're somebody that's into mindfulness or you're somebody that has insomnia or you want to try something new, I highly recommend this one as it's a very well designed app. I've had it on my phone for years. I only use it sporadically, but I've used it quite a bit over the last month and a half. And it gets refreshed periodically. I looked at it just before recording today, and it was last updated in October of 2019. So, every few months it looks like they push out upgrades. So that's good news for its longevity.
The website for this is not binaural.com, is it?
No, it's the name of the developer.
Oh, I see. Because binaural.com is scary. It's
I don't doubt it.
It's a website literally from 1985.
Yeah, well, because this touches on things like meditation and wellness and whether you can actually induce these brain waves in yourself by listening to them. I'm sure that if you look up binaural beats online, you're going to find all sorts of absolute BS about it. Pseudoscientific garbage, and you're going to find the usual kind of grifters that make something and dump it. But this one has been doing the trick for me. It's helped me calm and relax when I've needed to.
Yeah, and in the end, that's all that really matters, right? Is
that's what matters to me right now.
Is it doing something for you? And if it is, then great. That's literally all that matters. So, all right, well, cool. I think this would be good for archaeologists as well and people interested in these kinds of things. 'Cause I'll tell you what. I have this app called Pizziz, and I've talked about it, I think, a long time ago on this podcast. And it's really, it's sounds, and it's also narrative too. They like kind of tell you a story a little bit, but it's all designed to help you get to sleep. And I never use it at home, but the minute I'm in a hotel room by myself, like if my wife's not there, I put this on my iPad next to me in the bed, and that's what I listen to go to sleep, because you've just got you've got the air conditioner or heater running. It's usually one of the two. A hotel room is never at a good temperature, so it's always either the air conditioner or the heater. I don't care what time of year it is. And then you've got other sounds, people in the hallway because people are rude and they think they can talk at full volume outside your door, and things outside the window. And it's just, I need something, and whatever works for you to be that something. Some people might listen to music. Some people like this binaural thing. I'm going to certainly check it out, because I've got to go to New Orleans and spend a few nights in a hotel next week. And I think that it could be another thing, because sometimes I get distracted by that Pizziz one. I'm so used to it now. It just kind of like, it's almost like a trigger. Like when I hear it, I just go to sleep. And but I might need something different to help me really go to sleep and relax, because I think this keeps my brain active and puts me to sleep, but then gives me weird dreams. So anyway, yeah. Okay, well, cool. Well, we'll link to that in the show notes, and we'll link to the RV Trader app in the show notes. So when you're sleeping in a loud RV park, you'll have another app to help you, tune out all the noise. So there you go. Good. It all comes together. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Paul, and thanks everybody for listening. We have a packed list of guests coming up. We actually don't have anyone for our March 19th release, which the recording for that will be a week and a half before that. So if you're interested in talking about something on the Archaeotech podcast, whatever research you're doing, trust me, you're probably using technology. So come on the show, head over to archpodnet.com/Archaeotech, and that's ARCHAEOTECH. On the right-hand side, you'll see a link that says schedule an interview. And the only thing available in March will be this recording time. So if you can do that, great. If not, I'm sure Paul and I will find something to talk about, or we might get a guest between now and then. But next week, we're bringing on Dan Bigman, and he's going to talk all about GPR and other geophysical techniques. He's a GPR expert, does all kinds of training around the world. He's always over on Australia and different countries teaching people how to use GPR. So that's going to be a great interview, and I'm really looking forward to that. So again, thanks, everybody, and thanks, Paul. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Chris. See you.
Thanks for listening to the Archaeotech podcast. Links to items mentioned on the show are in the show notes at www.archpodnet.com/Archaeotech. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com and paul@lugal.com. Support the show by becoming a member at archpodnet.com/members. The music is a song called Off-Road and is license free from Apple. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.